Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got from Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak coming onto the Nintendo Switch and PC of summer of next year. And if you've been keeping up with the news, you know that on September 30th, Capcom will be hosting their presentation showcasing a little bit more about the game at 6 AM Pacific Time, 9 AM Eastern Time. But we don't necessarily know when it comes to Sunbreak what they'll actually present. And this is actually what I want to make this video about and hear a little bit of your guys' takes as to what the presentation could specifically hold when it comes to Sunbreak. To keep it in perspective, we already know several other things according to Capcom directly what other things they're actually going to present. The 5th collaboration from Capcom into Monster Hunter Rise is something that they're going to touch upon. Perhaps the reveal for the PC version, or at the very least, the first trailer we're also going to be able to see. Obviously, Monster Hunter Stories 2 is going to get touched upon a little bit, and all of that, that's all well and great. But when it comes to Sunbreak specifically, this is something that was revealed after all that information came ahead. We don't necessarily know what to expect. Obviously, we know a few details about the game, like new storylines, new monsters, new locales, new gameplay elements, obviously the G rank expansion. All of this is something that Capcom has already confirmed is going to be part of the game. But when it comes specifically to this presentation, I don't actually necessarily have a really good read as to what they could go ahead and showcase, so I want to hear your guys' perspectives when it comes to that specifically. And to contextualize this a bit further, I guess we have to go back to the original Monster Hunter Rise reveal and the original presentation that we got. Basically, we just pretty much got a trailer revealing Monster Hunter Rise, and then we got like a Monster Hunter Rise Direct after the official Nintendo Direct. But that was pretty much out of nowhere. We didn't necessarily know what to expect. This time around, Capcom is telling us directly they're going to showcase Sunbreak to some extent in their Capcom presentation for Tokyo Game Show, so it leaves a lot of things to be pretty much up to speculation as to what we could actually expect to see. Would it be one of those things where like all we can actually expect to see is just the name reveal for the monster that we saw, the alleged vampire monster or whatever? I don't necessarily know. Would that actually be the only thing that they actually go ahead and reveal? Remember that when it came to the long road of information that they gave us in between the reveal of Monster Hunter Rise and its actual launch, they were pretty like quiet with a lot of the information. Obviously a lot of it leaked and stuff like that, so we got our hands on a lot of it. But when this comes specifically to this expansion, we don't necessarily know, and we do have like a pretty long time to be able to see more information. Remember that this is launching of summer of 2022, and we're like in September still of 2021. So we could be looking at like 10 to 11 months until this game actually launches. And it's one of those things like they could just pretty much take their time revealing everything that they're going to reveal up until the launch of the game next year. Also, obviously, with the inclusion of the PC version as well, which is going to have its very own audience and its very own hype. I don't necessarily expect them to talk about cross-play or like cross-progression or cross-saves or anything along those lines at this point in time. If they do showcase some PC stuff, it's most likely just going to be like what it looks like and pretty much that. But when it comes to Sunbreak specifically, I don't even think they're even going to get into that conversation of like PC, Switch versions, whatever. They're just going to show the game, and then you obviously think Nintendo Switch, obviously, because that's what their marketing is most likely going to be tailored to. So I wouldn't necessarily go into this presentation expecting to see a brand new area or even other monsters, to be quite honest with you guys. Maybe they'll mention, like, you know, obviously the concepts of the additional subspecies. This is something that has been hit up on time and time again. People are expecting subspecies into the game. You know, perhaps other major mechanics, but even then I wouldn't necessarily expect them to even hint at or wait. I just recently made a video yesterday, I think, talking about underwater combat. Just me speculating, would they even consider bringing that back? And it's one of those things that obviously they wouldn't even show that here. It would be something that they would just make their own presentation for, or even during a Nintendo Direct at some point in the future, and just reveal that where they have most eyes for the game. It wouldn't be necessarily something that they just showcase here for the very first time. Also, I don't think it would be necessarily one of those like hype reveals. I think that's almost like more reserved for like a niche audience, like fans of the series who love like underwater combat, or at least remember the old games. They'll be more into that, but not necessarily something like new fans are going to clamor on to and be too excited about. So all in all, when it comes to just reveals, I would probably just expect them to showcase the same trailer again. Capcom has been prone to do just that. They've done that multiple times in the past. Whenever they hold their own presentations, they'll showcase the same trailer again, and they'll probably talk a little bit, or at least around the fact that this monster is probably some type of vampire monster. You know, maybe give us a name or two. But other than that, I wouldn't really expect too much of it. And I think that's the real bummer out of all of it, because I do think that out of nowhere, and I did speak to this to some extent a couple of days ago after the reveal of the game, that it was just kind of took me by surprise. I think it took a lot of people by surprise. I don't think it necessarily was something that like a lot of people had insider information as to what was going to be revealed in the Nintendo presentation. We did expect information at Tokyo Game Show for other things, but not necessarily in the Direct itself. So it was one of those that it took a lot of people by surprise. They weren't necessarily expecting it. And at the end of the day, I don't think we really just expected this that early. I think ultimately that's what it boils down. Again, the game is most likely going to release in about 10 to 11 months. That's not anytime soon. That's almost a year. So their roadmap for like just revealing information, it's a pretty long one at the very least. And I guess it does bring into question, where does Monster Hunter Rise stand at this point in time after they start talking about Sunbreak and essentially its release? Because it's one of those things where like you can't honestly sit here and expect Capcom to start dropping more monsters and more big additions into Rise when they could just hold off all of that and add it into Sunbreak and actually make it a more appealing product. Obviously, that's just the most common sense approach when it comes to just decision making in that regard. So all we really have to wait for when it comes to Rise is just that 5th collaboration later for the fall. And after that, I wouldn't necessarily even know where they're going to go with that after that. I don't necessarily know like if they're even going to continue attempting to try to make it seem like they're actually adding in more content into the game, other than the, obviously event quests and stuff like that. So as of this point in time, I think we're in a really weird spot when it comes to Rise, because again, there's so much time until Sunbreak, and I don't necessarily know, they haven't necessarily laid out their roadmap heading into what Sunbreak, between right now and Sunbreak. So it's one of those things where like, I don't necessarily know, even when it comes to Rise, what we can actually expect and what Sunbreak is actually going to ultimately add in to, I guess, complete the game. That's actually one of the biggest things that I've talked about overall entirely when it comes to just what the G-Rank expansion, before we even knew the name of it, what the G-Rank expansion was ultimately going to end up meaning for Rise. Is it just going to mean that it's now fully a complete package like Iceborne was to World? Or is it just going to be one of those things where it's just another layer of the same thing? I would hope, because their wording specifically talks about a massive amount of content, a massive expansion, they are making it sound like this is going to be hefty. This is probably going to be, let's just be fair about it, maybe half of what the game actually is right now, Monster Hunter Rise. So let's say they add 2 to 3 more areas, maybe 4 to 5, really optimistic when you think about it, and a whole heck of a lot of monsters. Let's say 10 new monsters, and then a whole bunch of such PCs and Apex monsters, which I've talked about in the past. That would be pretty substantial, but would people actually be happy about that? I don't necessarily know. And between now and then, where would Rise ultimately end up being? Will they continue to support it in a real way, or will we just continue to get these weird collaborations and just event quests that are very hit and miss ultimately from week to week? I would love to hear your guys' feedback on this. I've been racking my head as to what to expect when it comes specifically to Sunbreak and this Tokyo Game Show presentation, but I don't ultimately know. That's kind of like the thing. We are a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers. Hopefully you guys found this informational and you enjoyed it. If you are brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.